It's time for the Rose Chat Podcast, a podcast dedicated to celebrating the world's most beloved flower, the rose. Join award-winning gardeners Chris VanCleave and Teresa Byington as they chat with rose lovers and experts from around the globe. With each episode, you'll gain valuable knowledge and insights to achieve the rose garden you've always dreamed of. Listen now as we explore the world of roses.
Try Haven brand soil conditioners, providing generations of gardeners with a truly all-natural alternative to chemical fertilizers with their line of composted manure and alfalfa teas. Easy to brew and use on all indoor and outdoor plants. Find them online at manuretea.com.
Hey friends, Nate Fisher is with us today. Now he's the president of the Lehigh Valley Rose Society and the recent recipient of the American Rose Society Rising Star Award. After today's chat, there'll be no doubt why he was chosen to be the Rising Star. This millennial is busy for roses. Hey Nate, welcome to Rose Chat.
Hey.
It's so good to be with you, and there's so many things to talk about. But let's start with how you became interested in roses.
So I want to say around 2016, I planted about 6 roses on the side of our house. It was downtown on a corner lot, and planted them in April, and they grew. And in June, we started noticing people coming to our front door to knock and ask about the roses on the side of our house. And so I wound up, going out with these people and like pointing out the different roses and explaining what they were. And it happened on a regular basis. And I was like, you know what? I really like doing this. So I planted another like 25 or so along the side of our house so that there was a row down that street. And basically from that point, I was pretty much hooked on growing roses. A little bit after that, I wound up planting a rose garden at my grandparents' house. They had a pipe, like a sewer pipe, towards the back of their property, and I always mowed their lawn. And I got kind of sick of mowing around this pipe. So I said, you know what, I'm going to plant a garden bed here so that I don't have to mow around the pipe anymore. So I wound up planting about a dozen roses. I cut out a fairly large bed there and planted about a dozen roses. And since it's expanded a little bit, she has a little arbor now, as well as a swing and a little table for coffee and stuff. So she goes down there and enjoys her little rose garden, which is neat. She's asked me a couple times over the phone through text message, I have these spots on my leaves. What should I do? So it's kind of neat to get her interested in growing roses now that she's retired. So after I did that, we moved to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, in the historic downtown section, and our lot was, I want to say, a little bit under a quarter of an acre. And I drew out plans for garden beds throughout the whole yard and then just started tackling it a little bit at a time. I did one along the sidewalk. I planted maybe a dozen roses. And then I said, that's not enough. I need to keep going. So I went along the one side and basically wound up in one short season, I had probably 50 to 60 roses planted in that year. And then we actually wound up having to downsize because of COVID. And I went to a smaller house with a smaller lot. Our backyard now is 16 and a half feet by 47 feet. And I got a lot of questions like, are you upset to lose all of what you've done at your old house? And I said, no, I don't mind it at all. I'm happy to leave the roses there and to have a fresh slate to do it again. So I really enjoy doing that, the design and planting something new and making improvements over things that I felt I could have done differently the previous time. So.
Oh, that's the designer in you. That's always the case. Give us a clean slate. It's exciting. You know, COVID changed a lot of things for a lot of people. And so you found yourself in the season of change with more time in your hands. But if ever someone took lemons and made lemonade, you sure did. So tell us what happened when you had more time.
So I did enjoy gardening, and I enjoyed planting roses. I didn't think that I would be able to get seriously into being a Rosarian until I retired. But when COVID started around March of 2020, I found myself with a lot more time on my hands. So I'm a piano teacher, and at the start of COVID, of course, all of my lessons got canceled. And then eventually we wound up doing online, and I got some students back through that, but wound up with a lot of time on my hands. And so I said, you know what, now's the perfect time. You know, I enjoy going outside and gardening. It helps me feel better if I'm upset. So perfect opportunity. And so I looked around to see if there were any local rose societies, and I was really surprised that there weren't. The Lehigh Valley, where I live, is a pretty big area, and it's basically becoming a suburb of not only Philadelphia, but New York as well. There's a lot of people that live in this area that get up at 5 o'clock every morning and travel to work in New York, or they travel to work in Philadelphia. So big area, big growing population, and no rose society. Once I started doing research into it, I found out that there actually was a Lehigh Valley Rose Society at one point. They operated from 1947 actively until around 1997. And then they wound up completely ceasing operations, as far as I can tell, in November of 2002. So I thought, you know what? Why don't we start up the local chapter again? So I did, before doing that, of course, I looked into other local rose societies and how they operate, what they do well, some things that I think maybe could be improved upon. I wanted to make sure that this would be something that would be successful. I mean, surely there was a reason the Rose Society closed down back then. So I wanted to make sure that we didn't have the same situation that happened back then. One of the easiest ways to find local societies was to find those that were active on social media. Very easy to do a quick search on Instagram or Facebook. And I honed in on a couple, Portland Rose Society, Kansas City Rose Society, Atlanta. There was a couple that, really active on social media. And so I did research into what sort of events they do, what sort of fundraising they do, how many members they have, what they charge for membership dues and things like that, and kind of tried to figure out what would work well for us. So I started with just myself. I reached out to ARS and said I'd like to start a local society, and they sent me a booklet with kind of the information to get started in terms of drafting bylaws and registering. And from there, I put an ad on Facebook and got our first 3 members that way, and grew from there. So my wife, she is not a web designer professionally, but she did a lot of coursework with different web designing programs. And so she helped me, like if I said, I would like the website to do this, she would kind of like talk me through how to do something if I couldn't figure it out. So we set up a website where people can sign up to join our chapter online or by paper. And then we set up Facebook and Instagram and kind of went from there. It was important to me that we do things that elderly Rosarians would feel comfortable with, as well as to encourage younger people. So when we had the online option to join, we also made sure to include a paper option. If someone wanted to fill out a paper form and mail it in with a check, they would be able to do that. And just that sort of flexibility and inclusiveness we've tried to maintain this whole time. So we have the website, we have the Facebook, we have the Instagram. We did a couple Facebook ads in the beginning and got a fair amount of members that way. It was important as a new society to me to make it feel like there was a lot of benefits that you could get from joining because we were new, because we didn't have a lot of members. So I went around to local garden centers to make sure to get some like member benefits set up. So there's a local garden center, Four Seasons Garden Center in Briningsville, that offers 15% off all plants and 10% off everything else to our members. Yes. I also worked out a deal with Felco where our members get 15% discount off of their website. And then I worked out a deal with David Austin Roses where we got bare root roses from them for $15 a piece.
Oh, you have been busy.
Yeah. So in April, when I was getting our society set up, in the back of my mind, I wanted our group to help with the Bethlehem Rose Garden. I thought, this will take maybe a year or two to get up and running to be able to do this. But by June, so just a couple short months later, we already had that program to start.
Now, another thing that I think you've been actively doing is addressing the fundraising issue and partnering with other local groups. So tell us about that.
So a nonprofit, even though it is a nonprofit and not a traditional business, still has expenses and still needs to have some source of income. And to me, when I was researching, I noticed that Portland Rose Society has their own fertilizer, and that seems to be a big fundraiser for them. So that was one thing that I wanted to do, is to get our own fertilizer established as a source of income for the society, but also working out deals with rose growers so that we could do rose sales each year. And then working with other businesses that sell or produce rather rose-themed products. So rose soap, rose bath bombs, rose bath salts, things like that, that we could sell as a fundraising opportunity as well. So we got wholesale accounts set up with a bunch of different businesses and then got established as a vendor at the Bethlehem Rose Garden Farmers Market. And we had a tent set up there every Saturday during the summer to sell those items as a fundraiser. We also...
Great idea. Super great idea.
And I liked the idea of expanding it to rose-themed products because it brought in a lot of people to our tent that were not rosarians themselves, that were more of like casual gardeners, or just people that liked the rose scent. And then they would come up to our tent to purchase, let's say, soap. And they would say, I have this one rose in my front yard. It's not doing really well. And they'd, it'd spark a conversation. And they'd come back and they'd ask more questions the next week. Or they would come back and they would purchase, fertilizer from us. And then they'd come back like a month later and say, my rose has been doing great. That fertilizer is working really well. So it's kind of neat to build those relationships. I've been trying to point out to a lot of people that don't necessarily like to do the fundraising part, that it's not just, fundraising for the organization. It's also community outreach, and it's showing people that we are here as an organization, that we're a community resource. People are coming up to us and asking us questions. It's not just selling the products. So that has been important to me as well.
Let's back up just a little bit and talk a bit about the Bethlehem Rose Garden.
Sure.
You said that it was neglected in your notes. And so what did you find there?
So the Bethlehem Rose Garden was originally planted in 1931. The history of it's kind of interesting. The park superintendent at the time published a notice in the newspaper in February of 1931 asking for the Bethlehem Gardening Club's assistance in planting a rose garden on a piece of property that was formerly a school, and it had been bulldozed and the site had been cleared. They asked to do this shortly after Allentown started their rose garden, which is the city directly next to Bethlehem. So it's kind of like a friendly competition between the two cities. But so they started the process in February of 1931, and by May of 1931, they opened the rose garden with 3,500 roses, and then the following year, they planted another 1,500 so that they'd have 5,000 total. And the articles talking about this talk about how there were thousands of visitors with cars lining the street all around the block, and just like what a sight it was to see. And at that time, from the articles we found, they had over 200 volunteers to get this up and running. And then the city was in charge of the maintenance for several decades. They had at least one full-time employee. I think they had two, possibly a full-time and a part-time employee. But then over the years, the budget kept getting cut for the Rose Garden. And then our vice president, who has a history degree, was very interested in researching this and going through the archives and the city budget over the years. She noticed that in 2017 was the last year that they had a line item for the Rose Garden, and it was $2,000. They had not had any employees maintaining the Rose Garden for several years. And basically the Parks Department, the only thing they would do is go through between the beds and mow the grass, and that was it.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Oh goodness.
So Allentown Rose Garden actually had an issue with rose rosette disease a couple years ago, and they did not catch it in time, and they lost over 700 roses. And the same thing happened to Bethlehem. So in 2020, in June of 2020, one of the Bethlehem City Council members put out a notice on Facebook that they were looking for volunteers to weed in the Bethlehem Rose Garden because the weeds had gotten taller than the roses that were still remaining. And I saw this, as our organization was only a couple months old, I saw this and I said, you know what, this is the perfect opportunity for our organization to start getting involved with the Bethlehem Rose Garden. I sent an email out to our members. At the time, I think we had about a dozen. And we went there that first Saturday in June and looked around, and we noticed, some of these roses are showing clear signs of RRD. So we went to the city council president that was there and said, hey, these roses really should be removed. And he was like, wait, there's someone here that knows what they're doing?
Oh, no. Oh, yes, there is.
Ecstatic. And then it was funny. We started to remove some of those roses, and we're telling people there about make sure to clean your tools and things like that. And I noticed later that week a new Facebook event for the following Saturday was set up again by the same city council member, and it said check in with Nate. And I had no clue that he had designated me as the clipboard holder from that point on. And so we started organizing these regular events every Saturday from June through September. And at that point, other organizations started getting involved. The Mount Airy Neighborhood Association, which is the neighborhood association that the Rose Garden is in, they were kind of leading the charge in fundraising for the park at that point. And Bethlehem Backyards for Wildlife is another environmental group, nonprofit in the area that they had some members involved. And then also the Environmental Advisory Council. One of their members, actually two of their members, were there on a regular basis helping out. So our vice president that I mentioned that has a history degree, she also has an engineering degree, and she plotted out the entire garden in like AutoCAD and went through with me to count the number of roses that were there. And what was once a garden of 5,000 roses was down to about 400.
Oh my goodness.
And then we removed at least another 100 roses that had clear signs of RRD. So it wound up going down to about 300. And then the Mount Airy Neighborhood Association, they got a tourism grant from the county for $5,000, and they used that to bring in a horticulturist to design some. They didn't want to recreate this 5,000 rose garden if the city was not going to have full-time employees to take care of it. So the horticulturist they brought in designed something with a lot of like native perennials and things like that to still fill the beds without having, 5,000 roses again.
Mm-hmm.
And then she also consulted with Steven Scaniello for some ideas with what to do with the roses that were there. And then he wound up getting a donation of around 200 roses from Star Roses and from Weeks Roses. And so our group, after we got all of the clear RRD roses out, we wound up transplanting the rest of the roses that were there to kind of fill in gaps and create empty beds to put the new roses into.
It sounds to me like you have some very enthusiastic volunteers. It's something
Yes.
every society would be a bit jealous of. So I'm
Yeah.
sure you treat your volunteers very well and keep them excited and going. I can tell that you're a natural community builder. So tell us a little bit about the volunteers.
Yes, I would love to talk about that. One thing to me that I noticed with a lot of rose societies, and I mean no disrespect or anything, but I noticed that a lot of them really heavily focus on their annual rose show. And to me, that kind of only really interests the people that are already like hardcore into roses. And with doing this community engagement and this volunteer work with the Rose Garden, we brought in a lot of people that were casual gardeners. Some of them didn't even necessarily grow any roses at all, but they were interested in what we were doing. They were interested in like looking across the street from their house and seeing all of the progress being made. And so a ton of young, energetic, enthusiastic people came to help with weeding because they're like, well, I don't know anything about roses, but I can pull weeds. Or I don't know anything about roses, but I can dig holes. And so that got us a lot of younger people that really helped out with the physical labor. And then there was a lot of elderly members of the community that saw what we were doing and liked it and said, you know what, I can't help physically. I'm sorry, I can't, get down on my hands and knees and pull weeds, but I can write a check. So we got...
Please.
Yes. So we've gotten donations from elderly members of the community that love what we're doing. And, we've been able to use those funds to purchase gardening tools and things like that. So it's gotten a lot of people involved that way. The other thing is we actually reached out to there's an organization in the area called Volunteer LV, and they are basically record keepers for anyone that has to do community service hours. So like Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, some of the local high schools require their students to do a certain number of community service hours, like probation and parole departments. So they keep track of volunteer hours for all of those different groups. And they have a website where nonprofits can post, work that they need volunteers for. And so I got us established with Volunteer LV, and then we would have people coming, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, probation people, high schoolers that had to do community service. And so we got a lot of people that way as well.
I can't even tell you how much I love this. This is just so good. It's just good for everyone. It just brings people together like no other.
Yes. It was great to see, you know, we would have, my own children out there digging holes, and they're, you know, Kira is 9 and Whitney is 6 and Owen is 2. And they would get so proud about this one hole that they dug, that they made it big enough to fit a rose in. And then we would have, there was one, he was like a college, or no, I think he was a senior in high school, like on the football team. He's probably like 6'5", big burly teen. And he went through and dug like 100 holes for us in a day. And then
what is his name? I think I need him.
Right? That's what everyone was saying. They were asking if they could book him for their own gardens. But, and then we had, you know, we've had people come in that are, you know, retired, and they come in like early on a Wednesday morning and weed for an hour or two, and then they go. So it's really neat to see the variety of people. And, you know, we have people that don't garden at all. We have like master gardeners involved. We have, you know, people with degrees in horticulture and botany. And then we have, you know, people that are interior designers. So it's neat to see the wide variety of people that are coming together to work on a project like that.
Oh, it's just, it draws you to it. It's like, you know, can I sign up? You know, it just sounds like something, a community project that just is going to bring everyone together. It's just fun, hard work, but fun, and so rewarding. And it's not the only project you've got going.
That's right.
So, you know, let's transition into this big project you're working on. I sort of feel like after all that, I need a drum roll to show how important this next project is. But so tell us about it.
Well, as I said before, with loving to have a blank slate and loving to, you know, keep doing new rose gardens, after we got Bethlehem Rose Garden, now, not to say that there's not still work that needs to be done, because of course there is, it's an ongoing thing. But after we got it under control, I found myself wanting to do more. So in July, I reached out to all of the different municipalities in our area that currently do not have a rose garden and said, hey, would you like a rose garden? And Upper Saucon Township, which is mostly covers Center Valley, Pennsylvania. It's kind of partway between Allentown and Bethlehem. And I sent the email to them at like 8:00 at night on a Thursday, and they responded at 7 a.m. the following day, yes. So I met with one of the township supervisors maybe a couple days later. They have one community park that they established in the 90s, and they started a new park. It's about 70 acres next to an elementary school. And they had the parking lots in place, they had the walking trails in place, and they had the athletic fields in place, and they had the restroom facility in place. But they did not have any landscaping done. At that point, they didn't have the pavilion done, and they're still planning to do an outdoor amphitheater and a couple other projects there. And they did not have the playground done. I met with them, again, I think that was a Friday that they said yes. I think I met with them like on a Tuesday morning the next week. And I had already kind of sketched out an idea, and I looked up on their website the park map beforehand so I could get an idea of potential places to put it in that park. And I met with them, and I had not had a chance to drive through that park yet, and the places that I was thinking of weren't really going to be a good place in terms of like drainage issues and things like that. So I met with them, and they said, we think a good spot would be right here. And it was right next to one of the parking lots. It was next to where the pavilion was going to be constructed, and it was near the restroom. It was right where they were planning to put the playground. And they said, I imagine you'll need water and electrical, and we don't want to mess up the walkways that we've already put in place. So we would rather have you guys here and move the playground to the other side of that sidewalk so that we don't have to break up the sidewalks to run electrical and plumbing. And it was the spot that I thought would be perfect, but I didn't want to say, hey, can you move the playground so we can put it? So I was very excited.
Oh my goodness, meant to be for sure.
Yes. And the spot is about 150 feet by 90 feet. And it comes out to like 0.31 acres out of the 70-acre park. But it's perfectly level. There's no drainage issues. It has, a ton of sunlight and everything. It's really an ideal location. And so I showed them a design, just a rough sketch that I had come with, roughly 60 feet by 120 feet. I figured deer would be an issue, so it's fenced in. And then one of our board members is a horticulturist, and he really wanted us to do a monarch way station garden incorporated with this. So he is designing, it's a roughly 4,000 square foot pollinator garden to surround the rose garden and fill up the rest of the gap around the 120 by 60 foot garden. So our vice president has started working with the Pennsylvania Master Gardeners program, and she is now also trying to get it classified as a demonstration garden. So that has been like my main goal for our organization in general, is to be like an educational resource for the community. So I'd really like our group to get, the local elementary schools, maybe, growing annuals for the garden, or raising butterflies to release in the garden, different things like that. So I'm really excited about that project.
Oh my goodness. Now you designed the garden, so tell us what you've put in the design.
Okay, so there are 672 roses in the design and 576 bulbs, annuals, and perennials, and that's excluding the 4,000 square foot garden that Tyler is designing. I shared this design with a couple local Rosarians, and the immediate response I got was, there aren't that many hybrid teas. And that's correct. I've included some hybrid teas, but there are not that many hybrid teas in the design. One thing that I've found, not just with our own members, but with a lot of the casual rose growers in our area that are not yet members, a lot of them just personally don't like hybrid teas. They like English shrubs, Floribundas, grandifloras, more in that range. And so the design it's featuring roses that people in our community are most interested in growing. So there's a lot of David Austin roses in there. All of us have quite a few of them. I have maybe 50. One of our board members has 120 of them. Our vice president has maybe a dozen or so. And a lot of people in the Lehigh Valley that are not members of LVRS yet also grow a lot of David Austins. And then there's a lot of the roses that are very popular on Instagram, Poseidon, Coco Loco, Tequila Supreme, Twilight Zone. I'm trying to think. I mean, a lot of roses that people see and they're like, oh, I have to have that, even if they don't grow roses.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we want them to be roses that are sustainable for the casual gardener. And oftentimes, many of the hybrid teas, they just require a different mindset, a different type of care. My garden is large and I have, 150 or so roses. And I too have very few hybrid teas because it's a cottage garden setting and they just aren't that happy in that setting. And I love hybrid teas, but I have to enjoy them in other people's gardens. But most of the people who come to my garden on open garden days, they enjoy that they're going to see roses in my garden that they can grow easily in their own gardens. And I love that. I love getting to share something that people can take and put in their own gardens and enjoy with minimal care. Now, speaking of purchasing roses, I saw on Facebook that you're in the process of doing that.
Yeah.
And how's that going?
So it has been a nightmare trying to get my hands on this many roses. We have wholesale accounts set up with Star, Weeks, David Austin, and the roses I picked, we could get virtually all of them from those 3 people. And then there were a handful of other roses that I wanted to get that we wouldn't be able to source from them. But, I wasn't expecting it to be that difficult. And I thought, still early in the year, should be good to go. But mid-October, so we started fundraising for the project to pay for everything in mid-September. And by mid-October, we had enough raised that we could start placing orders for roses. I thought, mid-October, it's not till, like April of next year that we would need to plant them. That should be fine. And the first response I got was from Star to say, we're sold out for 2022. And we'll probably have to start rationing the orders that we have in place already. He said, if we potentially release more roses or something like that, I will let you know, but we can't take an order at this time. And then David Austin, they split their available roses between wholesale and retail because they sell to retail. They sell retail on their website. And their wholesale roses were sold out. And they said their retail roses were almost sold out for 2022. Wow. So that had me in a little bit of a panic. What's a rose garden without roses? So I started reaching out to smaller rose sellers and retailers instead of trying to get them wholesale. And so I wound up what I expected to would be 3 or 4 large orders has been split into about a dozen smaller orders from other places. So I've ordered from Edmonds Roses, I've ordered from Chambly's, I've ordered from Witherspoon, I've ordered from Reagan, I've ordered from Heirloom, I've ordered from High Country Roses. Trying to think what else. I did wind up ordering from David Austin retail, and I ordered from one of the roses that I was trying to get, I was having a very difficult time finding. I posted about it on Facebook, and Beth Ann Mills, the president of West Jersey Rose Society, called me. And she said, we do an annual rose sale. And I reached out to the nursery that we get our roses from, and they will actually have enough roses to fulfill what you're looking for. And I spoke to our board, and they're willing to sell these roses to your society at cost. So there's about 88 roses that we'll also be ordering from West Jersey Rose Society, which is a huge help. But, ARS members, we recently got a letter from Craig Dorschel to say that one of the local garden centers near him in 2021 sold over 9,000 roses. And that's something that I've noticed, and I'm sure most of your listeners have probably noticed, is that in general, roses have experienced this kind of rebirth over the past couple years of people that are just getting into rose gardening now. And it's exciting, but, it takes several years for the rose growers to catch up to the increased demand.
Yes, that's very, very true. There are more people interested in gardening, growing roses than there's an excitement that I don't think I've ever seen before, which is so exciting. But we have to also remember that during COVID, many of these companies, they were not allowed to have full crews.
That's true.
So just the work that was being done was very limited, not like previous years when you could have, so many people in the garden and tending the garden and, hybridizing the roses and all of those things. So a limited staff ultimately meant a limited number of roses too.
Right.
So that those things just kind of snowball, and all of us feel the effects. But I feel that everyone is working very, very hard to meet the supply, the need that people have. So it's exciting, even though takes a little bit more time and that sort of thing. It's exciting that, everyone is kind of working together, even though, we may not get everything that we want, but it's creating a teamwork of sort that is beautiful to see, I think.
Oh, for sure. And I'm excited to be working with a lot of these smaller retailers as well. It's been so nice to see. I've sent short emails out to say, hey, we were expecting to be able to order this wholesale. We're not at this point because of the scarcity. Would you be willing to work with us on pricing? And so many of these retailers have been so generous with giving us discounts and things like that. So, but it's just everyone that we've worked with so far has just been wonderful to work with. So
these relationships will just be invaluable in so many ways. Now, Nate, you're not just immersed in roses. You actually have chosen plants as a course of study. So in your spare time, tell us about that.
Yes. So in my spare time, I've been working on a degree in botany and plant pathology through Oregon State University's eCampus program. And what honestly got me interested in starting that was all of the issues with rose rosette disease that we are seeing locally. I've seen people mention it on occasion online in other parts of the country, but just the Lehigh Valley seems to be so badly impacted by it for some reason. The Allentown Rose Garden, the Bethlehem Rose Garden, many of our members have had issues with it as well. And so it's been known about since like the 1940s, but only serious research has been done into it for the past, decade or so. And so there's a lot of stuff that we're finding out about it that is brand new information. And so the research into rose rosette disease is what got me interested in starting the degree in botany and plant pathology. And so I started fall of 2020, and in December of 2020, when we were on winter break, so this was, maybe a couple of days before Christmas and everyone was out, all of the professors were, done for the year or whatever, I sent an email out to one of my botany professors, and I said, I'm really interested in getting a stereo microscope that I could use to, try and view aerophyte mites. And the entire botany department at Oregon State University during Christmas break were emailing each other, calling each other back and forth, like discussing the pros and cons of different microscopes. And just like, I was amazed that they were so enthusiastic to help me with this and during their break. And so I've been doing a lot of my own casual research and then some research guided by one of my professors. And that has been something that's been very interesting to me. And soil science is another thing that has been very interesting to me. And that kind of prompted the fertilizer.
It's just one more story of you just getting people banded together and excited about what they're doing. You just seem to be a natural. Even your professors in a microscope through Christmas break.
Through
So
Christmas break.
let's not forget that. Oh, just so well done, Nate. So well done. So in closing, what advice or encouragement do you have for those of your generation who are considering growing roses? Do you think they should wait till they're retired?
No, I think that was foolish of me to want to wait until retirement to get more serious about it. I know a lot of my members of the millennial generation. I know a lot are still renting houses, whether for personal reasons or just be preference, and they think, well, I can't have a garden because I live in a rental property. But I know of a lot of millennials that grow roses exclusively in pots. There's Ethan Taylor. I think he's in Pittsburgh. He might be affiliated with Pittsburgh Rose Society. He has dozens of roses in pots that he grows. And, or they say, I own my house, but I don't have that big of a yard. Well, my yard is 16 and a half feet by 47 feet, and I have about 80 roses. So there's always a place to put a rose. And I had a friend of mine that texted me when he bought his house. There were 3 knockout roses that had not been tended to probably ever, when they were planted. And he had some sawfly larvae and stuff like that. And so he just texted me a couple pictures and said, what do I do about this? And I said, spray this, or, I personally use only organic products. So I recommended a couple organic products for him to use. And then I said, why don't you try fertilizing it too? And he did. And then a month later, he texted me. He's like, this rose has never looked better. And he got excited about it. And then at our rose sale, he bought 5 Cupid's Kisses climbers to plant near his shed. And so now, he went from 3 knockouts and now he has 8 roses. So,
well, you can't just have 1 or 2 or 3. The more you have, the more you want. They're just beautiful, and they're rich in beauty, and they're rich in history. And so the more you know, it's kind of like the more you want to know, the more you want to experience. Well, Nate, thanks for coming today, and thanks for all that you're doing. Congratulations on the Rising Star Award.
Thank you.
We can certainly see why you were chosen. You are certainly a person who didn't let any closed doors stop you. COVID, no problem. You're just such an inspiration, and thank you.
Thank you.
And friends, wow, what a story we've heard today. And if you'd like more information on the Lehigh Valley Rose Society and the big projects they're doing, go to lvrosesociety.org, or you can find them on Instagram and Facebook, and we'll also have a link on the show page at rosechat.com. Now, this week in my world, we had our first snow, and it was enchanting for the moment. But this kind of weather puts me in a dream state of what it's going to be like when the cold is gone and the garden emerges again. So until next time, happy gardening or happy garden dreaming from your friends at Rose Chat.
You've been listening to the Rose Chat podcast with Chris VanCleave and Teresa Byington, expert rose gardeners who want to help you achieve the rose garden of your dreams. Don't miss an episode. Listen anytime on our website at rosechatpodcast.com, or listen on the go via the Rose Chat app on iTunes and Stitcher Radio. Share this podcast with your social networks and join us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram by using the hashtag RoseChat. Join us next time for another edition of the Rose Chat podcast. The Rose Chat podcast is a production of the Rose Chat Media Group, Birmingham, Alabama.